Hi, I'm Woo Young Chung, track producer for Track B. I'm delighted that you decide to join us for this session. See, the, the success story can inspire us and also spark our creativity. In this session, we have our distinguished speaker will present a success story from United Kingdom. So please, I'll hand it over to Davin.
Hello everyone, my name's Davin Crowley-Sweet and I'm the Chief Data Officer for Highways England. So first of all, welcome to my kitchen. I would have loved to have been in the States right now presenting, but clearly my kitchen's going to have to do enough. And my wife and lovely kids have left the house today because they knew this was a really important day. So they've all gone for ice cream because it's 100 degrees in the UK at the moment. I'm going to be presenting some slides. Before I do that, I just thought it's worth introducing Highways England, what we do, what we're about. We own, operate, design and build the strategic road network in the UK. And that's all of the federal highways, big motorways. But we're not just in the business of laying concrete, building bridges and operating the roads. We're in the business of connecting the country. We're in the business of helping people get from places they need to be, getting food to people's houses and getting connections in the UK. And we firmly live behind our passion and our purpose of connecting the country. We had this thought in Highways England that was around, if we want to connect the country, how can we be better connected ourselves? And what's the role of information in connecting the company so we can be better at connecting the country? I'm here today to talk to you about our story. I'd love to go through some slides, but I'm pretty sure you guys are sick of slides by now. So I'm hoping for some exciting conversations and some really good questions, both challenging the work we do. It would be interesting. It would be good to hear your views and how you've done it. Ultimately, I'm here to tell us a very simple story. And that's a simple story around how we've gone from a company with a relatively low data maturity in what we do to a company that recognizes our data as an asset almost on its balance sheet. We value our data in the same way that we value our physical infrastructure. And we've learned that our data is now worth £60 billion to UK PLC. And that knowledge has inspired a whole new way of thinking around our data as an organisation, from how we account for it, how we invest in it, how we talk about it, and the culture within the organisation. I'm of the school of thought that my role as a CDO is to inspire, to lead, and to create the culture and the environment for all of our data professionals and our business professionals who use data to be successful at what they do. So I'm just going to go to share the slides. Hopefully you feel like you're in the right room. And we'll go through our story. So, like I said, all things start with simple ideas, and this was our simple idea. We had the idea that maybe we had got it wrong, that the world has changed, that the rules that governed us have not changed and were written before digital data existed, and that we thought about how could we do data differently. I'm sure many of you have been in impossible places where the business wants data, but the business doesn't want to invest in data. They want to set grand digital transformation strategies, but they don't even know what data they have and what quality it exists at. So we had to start from scratch. We had to take our senior leadership, our executive committee and our board with us on this journey of data, and to really help them understand it. And this was our thought process around our simple idea. And it started with, as the screen suggests, we're governed by rules that haven't changed. And these rules were written before digital and data existed, really. Our business is predominantly guided by economists and accountants. Economists and accountants are guided by rules that were written pre-digital data. And those rules make your data invisible. How many of you see data on your balance sheet? I bet you see your tangible assets. I bet you see your intangible assets. And how many of your intangible assets are actually data assets? So the rules we're guided by make data invisible. And from that, you can't manage what you can't see. We're really good at managing physical infrastructure because our infrastructure lives on our balance sheet. It directs attention, it gets investment, people can see what they're investing in. And we just thought it was crazy that our Microsoft Windows licenses were worth more than our balance sheet, than 50 years of data and knowledge about how our organisation has successfully designed, built, maintained and operated one of the safest, most complex and high-performing pieces of critical transport infrastructure in the world. And did that feel right? And the answer was clearly no, it didn't feel right. So we thought, how do we go about valuing our data? And that's different to monetizing it. What we're talking about is understanding the value of our data. And we thought, what better way than use data to tell the story about data? And it's funny that I don't always see CDOs talking about this. We don't use data to tell our story, even though it's where our passion is and where our expertise. So what does the data say about data? So first of all, why has data become so important? And if I bring your attention to the graph on the right-hand side, that's the structure of the S&P. You know, that is the top companies in the S&P, and that's their market value. And it doesn't take a particularly empowered data scientist to work out what that graph is saying. That in the 70s, you could account for the value of the top companies by looking at the tangible assets in their balance sheet. But as time has progressed, we see much more of the value of the companies that are the top 500 on the S&P is actually being driven by the intangible value. And we felt, well, how much of that intangible value is data? Surely a large proportion of that intangible value is data. And you've only got to look at companies, Netflix, Facebook, all the FAANG companies who have got huge market value, but very low tangible assets on their balance sheets. Because I think one of the reasons why they're successful is they've forgotten the accounting rules and they've realized they've structured their business models around the value they create, not the balance sheet items on their balance sheet. The second area of thought for us was, well, what do CEOs say? Clearly, if you want to be successful in data, my view is that it's got to come from the top. It's got to be a message from your senior leadership, your board, your exec committees driving this. And the research is telling us that CEOs are saying that data is one of the most critical things that their organizations need to do. But at the same time, their levels of investment in data, their levels of investment in technology are peaking, but their actual levels of investment in data haven't moved anywhere. And I think this is a data problem and not a technology problem. And data in its broadest sense, so both the people, the processes, the skills, the leadership at an operational level and a strategic level. And the last one, perhaps a little bit controversial, and that might be a theme across my slides, is that we're simply not getting the return on investment that we were promised from large-scale tech programs in the 90s to 2000s and 2010. And the research backs that up. What it tells us is that 85% of digital and data transformations fail. And we're kicking that data can down the road, and those costs are going to accumulate over time. The more data we produce, the more incorrect data we produce, the greater the cost it's going to be to fix it. And another thing is we keep calling PaaS and SaaS programs digital transformations, hoping they sound good on LinkedIn or they get good press and stuff. But actually, they're not true digital transformations. They're technology implementations. And there's a big difference between a true data and digital transformation and the implementation of a SaaS or PaaS product. The last is our industry is full of buzzwords. I get emails on a daily basis about how the AI, auto, ML, blockchain, the low source, low crowd buzzword, is going to solve my problems, and it's not. I think there's a wealth of technology, and there's obviously some fantastic technology products that are out there. But I think ultimately, if you want to solve a data problem, you've got to really start with the purpose of your organization, what it's about, what decisions does it want to make, what data is needed to drive those decisions, and then think about what technology you use to enable that data to happen. And the other point is if you don't invest in your data to a level that's proportionate to the risk or value, don't expect it to get better. Like I said, on our balance sheet, our physical infrastructure is worth 115 billion pounds. And through the analysis we did and the valuation we worked out our data was 60 billion pounds. So our data was worth half the value of the tangible assets on our balance sheet. Yet, did the amount of board time talking about data, was it representative of the value of the data? If I looked at a business case that would come to me for sign off of the later project that someone wants to do, I might see 50% technology costs, 40% program management costs, 5% risk, and then 5% of the data architect who happen to be in the program. And we've started to shift that mentality that if you really want to deliver a return on investment, invest in your data to a level that's proportionate to the risk and the value that you wanted to do. So we had 3 real solid stories of data, what was data telling us, that data was becoming more important and more of our market value was driven by our intangibles, that we weren't investing enough in data, and we're not getting the return on investments on how we invest today. So clearly we've got to do something different. So we started right at the top. We wanted to do an enterprise data valuation, and we shamelessly stole from Doug Laney's Infonomics book, which I think has become probably the most valuable data asset in our organization at the moment. It's one of the best books you can read if you're a data professional. I'm not endorsed by Doug, I don't get anything from this, but if you haven't read that book or you're not familiar with this work, I'd strongly encourage you to get familiar and read it, because it will be how people are taught in the future of how things are done. You know, what did applying that methodology of understanding the value of our data teach us? Well, it taught us, like I said, our data is worth £60 billion to UK PLC. And what I want to do is to talk about how we calculated that, what the processes we used to do that, and then more importantly, what change journey happened as a result of that learning. So first, this is where we started. You know, we wanted to steal from some of Larry English's ideas around using things that already existed and applying to data. You don't need to build something new. There's perfectly good ways of being able to value physical assets. Why can't we apply that same logic to our intangible assets, and better still, our data assets? So we knew we had £115 billion on our balance sheet for our tangible assets, our roadside infrastructure, the road itself. And we knew from the work that we'd done at a corporate level that the return on investment value gives us a cost benefit factor of 2.7. So for every pound spent, we create 2.7 worth of value. So from that very simple piece of logic, we were able to work out that there's nearly 200 billion of intangible value that our organisation makes to UK PLC. The next part of the question was around, okay, well, how do we break up that intangible value? And then furthermore, how much of that tangible value is created and enabled by the data that comes from our organisation? And that's exactly what we did. So we went through a process of engaging our market, engaging our customers and our customers' customers, and dividing them into different sectors. You know, what does the logistics sector in the UK benefit from the data that comes out? How do major ports in the UK's benefit? You know, how does Tesco or Sainsbury's or the Walmarts of the world benefit from us producing data? You know, so us closing a road to do maintenance might absolutely critical stop products from getting into shops. You know, it might stop fans from getting to their latest sports arena. And we wanted to understand, well, what were those use cases? So we divided our market into 6 major areas, and we were able to then split down what were the use cases and how much of that intangible value is different to use cases. Some surprising learning from that as an example. So if you start ranking stakeholders by importance and you deem importance to be number of miles driven on the strategic road network, the freight sector actually drive a low number of miles. But actually, if you look at it from an intangible value perspective, in terms of the value drivers the freight market offers, suddenly they're in the top 3 of the most important people. So viewing your organization through different metrics like value will really shift your thinking into where your priorities are and who you really need to serve as a provider of services. We were then able to go through the different data sets. So we started looking through our data models, our ontologies, and we were able to break down in a human form what were the critical data sets and what were the data sets that were most important. And we were able to link that and start linking that together. So we were able to link through interviews and talking, creating 400 odd data points, lots of complicated algorithms. We were able to say, what's our economic value to the UK? How much of it is intangible? Where does that intangible value come from? By what sectors? What are the use cases that delivers that intangible value? What data is driving those use cases? And how dependent are those use cases on the data itself? That all went into a big computational model. It was a CNN, well, it was a type of deep neural network rather, and it gave us the answer that our data was worth £60 billion. So of that £200 billion of intangible value, our data was worth £60 billion. And can you imagine the moment we read that and we saw that and the figures stacked up? We worked with the likes of Cambridge University to do this and specialists, etc. And we were astounded. And we were astounded because we had the number and we were for the first time able to have a common denominator between the world of our physical assets and our tangible assets, which we like to invest in, and the intangible. And the analogy I often give is, if you remember when you're at school and you're taught to add fractions together, and your teachers always said, you can't add fractions together until you've got a common denominator. And what the valuation gave us was a common denominator. For the first time ever, we were able to see how our data relates in terms of value to our investments in physical infrastructure. So we were able to trade off, should we spend $1 million on physical infrastructure? Should we spend $1 million on data? And what's the impact if we do? And I thought this a little bit difficult to read, but I thought this graph would just help people see. On the left-hand side, you see our physical asset value and our intangible asset value, how that intangible asset value breaks down into the different market sectors that we serve, how those market sectors then deliver use cases to the UK, and how those use cases deliver value and what specific data sets. So I've got line of sight now between a data set in a register, like a geospatial model of our network, to the use cases it creates, to the value it creates, and to whom, and how that sits in our balance sheet and our intangible value. And that was a really powerful thing to say. We've moved our conversation to say, rather than you're accountable for our geospatial data, we've moved it to say, you're accountable for a £3.2 billion geospatial data set. Your accountability is to maintain the value of that data set and grow it by 5% every year. And that's a business language that people have started to get and more familiar. Because what we were learning, it's not that people don't want to invest in data, they lack the literacy to be able to have the conversation of what to do. Now, I'm not a civil engineer, but I understand what a bridge is, I understand what a blueprint is, and I understand at a high level what those things do. Could we say the same if our senior leader said, what's a data model? Would you know what it was and know how to use it? Even those things are very analogous in what they do. So we were able to create a line of sight between our data and our value in a language of the business that the business understood. And that earned us the right to deliver the strategy. And what I want to talk about from the strategy is that we didn't just write a document. Our strategy development was about 9 months worth of work. We interviewed around 300 to 400 people to do it. And we treated the strategy as a business change program in its own right. And that's something I think we really got right when we did this. We actually saw the creation of a strategy as a business change program, as opposed to let's deliver a strategy and then start a business change program. Our logic behind doing that, again, we use data to drive those decisions. So we said, well, what do we know? We know our data is worth £60 billion of value to UK PLC. And our forecasted expenditure over the next 5 years was about £5 billion a year on annual expenditure. So we thought, okay, what's a likely benefit that we could deliver over 15 years? Because we think data is a long-term investment and we need to think about the whole life of the data, not just the latest thing in the latest tool. And we thought we'd answer that question by doing a quick 12-week sprint to determine and estimate that value that was at stake. And we calculated, it was just an astonishing number, that there was a circa of £1 billion worth of value at stake, and that was cashable value. There was a whole load of socioeconomic value on the top of that, but cashable value in terms of cost reduction, if we had better data, we would be able to deliver £1 billion over that time period. And then we look back at what we knew already. So I talked about the cost benefit ratio of the 2.7. So we thought if we were going to deliver £1 billion of value, we would probably think it's going to take 300 million to get there. We're taxpayer funded. That's a huge burden on the country. If we want to do that, we need to be serious. So if the business and our exec is believing of the work around our data of 60 billion to UK PLC, and we think we can get £1 billion worth of cashable value by managing it and exploiting our data better, and we think the likely cost of that change program would be 300 million, do we think it's sensible to invest 1% of that forecasted spend in delivering the strategy? And you can do the maths, and then you quickly work out that delivering our strategy became a business change program in its own right, which I thought was a great step for our organisation, rather than a data strategy being a few architects locked in a room for a month producing a fabulous set of slides. We really engaged everyone. And we came out with something quite simple, a future where data creates trust, where data is the way we can connect as a company so we can better connect the country. We talked about the need to shift to a tolerable level of information risk in the first instance, laying the future for connected services, and then the ability to connect all of our service and create a digital customer experience in how we deliver road signs to the public, how we deliver large construction schemes in sensitive areas, how we transform the company and do that. And that's where that £1 billion worth of cashable value we thought was coming. And that was going to come in from around 60 to 70 business capabilities that could be better exploiting information that we would make more trusted for them to do. But that was optimization so far. That's about being better at what we do today. And what was interesting about the valuation that we did is some of the things we started to see. So we started to see data products that we invested in, but had a market value of zero. So we were buying lots of assets to help us understand what the weather is, but lo and behold, that's become a commodity product. And actually the market value of our data has become zero. Should we continue investing it, or should we outsource that? Additionally, we saw data sets where only we had that data. Only Highways England knows where road sites are going to, where road construction work is going to be, where the car is broken down, and what our response times to it. So from viewing the world from a value of data, we were able to see where we had a unique selling point, where we had ownership over a data set before anyone else could get on it. So let's absolutely treat that as our crown jewels and major that. And that's when we started seeing the world differently. So we recognized, actually, from a data perspective, we hadn't been clear enough with our organization around what market we're going to be in. Were we going to be a mobility as a service provider? Were we going to be in the business of journey planning? Were we going to be in the business of information provision? And through looking at our information through the lens of value, we were able to have a really interesting and exciting conversation with our board around, how do you see the business? You know, if you want to be a journey planner, do you recognize that we'd be competing with Google? If you want to be a mobility as a service provider, do you recognize you'd need to store data about all the transport networks, not just the strategic road network? And then our exec quickly realized that our role in this future is going to be an information provider. And we committed to a number of outcomes that we can see on the slide. And this material is obviously to take away and digest. And what was quite profound about that for me is that this wasn't about optimization. You know, optimization is where the information, the data, the technology is responding to business demand and becoming more efficient and effective. And this was true digital transformation. Through valuing our data and through seeing it through a completely different lens, we were actually able to shape our company's direction in a different direction. We were able to shape our company's purpose, our company's strategy to becoming an information provider of the future. And once we had set that North Star, you'd be surprised how many people galvanized with it and got behind it and knew what they were aiming at. So a lot of the activities on the side started to stop happening. And we've been really able to focus the business on, you know, these are our core things that we want to do. In terms of what it told us, so we completed that business change around the strategy. And, you know, funnily enough, the data was right. So this was a real lesson for us to trust the data. So what did the business change program around strategy tell us? Well, it told us that there was, as I said, 70 value propositions, 70 things that our business could do much better if they had better information. That would release 800 million to 1.2 billion pounds worth of cashable benefits through 49 initiatives or projects that we could do. Some of them were the direct things, the things that actually generate the value, and some of those things were the enabling things. And again, viewing our data through the lens of value really helps sell those non-glamorous IT projects that we often forget, like data governance and getting it right, getting your data architecture right, making sure your lakes and your warehouses and your marts are up and running. We're able to massively invest in the enabling stuff with the knowledge from our exec that it leads to and is a foundation for the much broader cashable benefits. So that's what we saw. And the best part about that was it breaks even. You know, the cost of the program is actually offset by the cashable benefits if you get it right. So we're not burdening the taxpayer with more ask for more money to do more things. We can pay for it by itself. And this was interesting for me because I think this was the thing that launched our CDO team. I've been a CDO for a long time now, and one of the things I've learned is that you've got to earn the right to do it. You know, the business often recruits a CDO and doesn't know what they want them to do entirely, or thinks of them slightly differently and is unsure. And you've really got to learn the right to do the CDO. And this earns us that right to do the CDO. And we made a case for it. So we needed to grow our capability. We needed to be a much larger CDO team. And not only did we need the accountability, we actually needed the authority to discharge them. When I joined our organization, what I felt was that we didn't have a CDO team. We had a group of data professionals. We had some information managers, but they had been beaten up for so many years. And not maliciously, they'd just been forgotten about, underinvested in, because they didn't have a seat at the table. We'd gone from a position where these guys didn't have a seat at the table, where these guys were the stewards and thought leaders of a £60 billion asset that was worth half the value of our tangible assets in our balance sheet. So armed with all that knowledge about our strategy and the value of data, we made our case to our executive and we said, here you go. You've got a vision of what you want to do. You've got a risk appetite of what you want to be, of what you want to operate in, and you've got a capability of data that looks like this. So that's what our data is telling us. What do you want to do? Do you want to lower your risk appetite? Do you want to scale back your vision? Or do you want to invest in growing the data capability so that we can deliver the vision and we can do it within the risk appetite we set? And to my heart and to my mortgage's pleasure and to my wife's smile, they chose to invest in the CDO, and we were able to grow our team a multi-year budget provisioned well in advance for us to work to. And we did that by doing a diagnostic of our organization to really learn what our capability was, because we wanted to be in the business of predicting and preventing data issues as opposed to finding them and fixing them. You know, my view is that if incorrect data is already in your IT, it's too late. And actually, we needed diagnostic and we needed capability to work at the leadership levels to make sure that data didn't end up being wrong. You know, people will tell you that you measure quality by looking at validity, and they're important, and all of that custom stuff's important. My number one measure of data quality is, has your CEO said it's an objective? You know, can I look all their executive directors in the eye and say, what's your data objective? And we had started to be able to do that, especially with the work around value, because we could assign data sets to executive directors with a value associated with it and start challenging them on there. What are you doing to maintain or grow that value? How are your actions in how you invest or how you act actually eroding value? Because if you erode value in that data set, you erode value in that use case, and you compromise the UK sector to be able to deliver on that £60 billion worth of value that we had. So we set up the CDO team, and this was the structure that we put forward, and we tried to keep this really simple. Again, our data literacy was quite low, and we wanted to make sure that people understood what the data was. And here's what our value proposition. So the first is setting the information vision and strategy for the business, and I can't underplay that. It's so important. You know, CDOs need to be at the absolute forefront at the C-suite, leading this organization, not just responding to the latest gadget someone wants, and be bold and be courageous and set a compelling vision and strategy. The second area was around defining the data our customers and colleagues needs. I'm sure if you've been a CDO and you're like me, so many people have come up to you and said, you know, Davin, my data is terrible, and we need to fix our data. And my first question I always come back is, do you know what good data looks like? Do you actually know what data you need? 9 times out of 10, people don't know how to answer that question. And I always answer it, if you don't know what good data looks like, how do you know the data you've got is terrible? And we've learned that data is very much an emotional problem. People don't feel like their data is good enough, even when it is, and even when they don't know what data looks like. So our data governance team really focuses on that point around, do we really understand what are the top 10, 20 pieces of information our organization needs and what good looks like. Once you know what you need, then you go through a process of understanding if it's fit for purpose. And the reason we say fit for purpose and not accurate is different people have different uses for the data and a different need for it. You know, if I'm strategically planning for the country, knowing what county my bridge is in is good enough. If I'm designing and building one, I need to know how many millimeters my geospatial position is of that bridge. Same piece of data, different level of confidence needed in its accuracy, etc. And understanding that so you can really look through the lens of the business when they view your data, as opposed to taking a singular view of data's good, data's bad. The next area is making our data accessible. You know, if your data's not accessible, then no one can use it. You know, if it's not available to people, it's a sunken cost. And the fifth area rather is using our data to generate value. But that only works if you've done the other 5. And we see those as a Venn diagram, not a linear flow of left to right. You know, sometimes you need to do something and generate some value to help people understand what data they actually need in the first place. And that way, our data scientists in my team don't have to wait until we've set a strategy, defined what we need, measured its fit for purpose, made it available before they can do their thing. So we see these as a Venn diagram of overlap, but clearly the projects that overlap the most deliver the greatest value. We committed to the business that we developed 3 core competencies, and I stress the word core competencies. Before, data was a competence in the organization. Now data is a core competence of the organization. You know, and they were the data information governance, the data architecture and engineering, and our data science capabilities. And then our services. It was important to me that people don't feel done to by the Chief Data Office, that they want to work with us to draw down on services we provide. And those services being our information management system, which is the rules by which we govern and assure our data. You know, if we needed to be able to help people understand, if you're going to manage a £60 billion asset, how do you do it? What do you need to do? What skills do you need to follow or have? What processes do you need to follow? Our data as a service, which is all around, you know, how do we connect our data? How do we engineer it? And how do we architect it? And how do we make it available? And our digital lab is both a way to use modern data science techniques to generate value, whether it be, you know, advanced computer vision on CCTV to be able to spot inspections that we do, but also a different way of working. Our organization was used to civil engineering, it was used to waterfall, it was used to construction. And we needed our leadership, we needed our graduates, we needed the future leaders of this organization to understand a different way of delivery, an agile way, a fast way, a way that embraces mistakes. You know, try something, learn from it, try again, do something differently, but don't quit. And don't wait until you've got everything perfect. Perfection is the enemy of success when it comes to data, I think. And from that, we led to data quality or asset condition. And this is a concept we had, is we felt one of the reasons why data is hard is we try and make the business speak data rather than our data's professional speak business. So as I mentioned earlier, we design, build and operate physical infrastructure to connect the country. So our organization was really familiar with the language of asset management or infrastructure asset management. Data quality meant nothing to them. It was a graph that went up or down that dictated if they were going to get shouted out or not. But we shifted it. Rather than talk about data quality, we talked about asset condition. You know, asset condition was a word they're familiar with. They understood bridge condition, road condition, pavement condition, you know, drainage condition. We just added another asset to the list. So what we learned is that if we wanted to be successful in helping people improve the data, helping people manage data, we had to adopt the language of the business. We had to find a way of talking to them in their language and how they do it. And we did that by adopting and using their language, again, building on the likes of Larry English and reusing things that already exist. And what we learned was that people got it. You know, people didn't understand the word data quality. They did understand the word asset condition. People didn't understand ROI in some cases. What they did understand was the word asset performance. And that helped us in a number of ways. It helped our business speak data, but it also helped our data professionals speak business. And by connecting those dots, we were able to really get the business in investing in very specific measures of the fitness for purpose of data at a very database level. You know, before we were going to invest, you know, I see so many investments not deliver the value of investment because they bought the tech and then forgot that they need the data to make it work. So by doing data condition assessments and really engaging the business in a way that they understood it, enabled us to stop investments, recalculate the real cost of investments by factoring what's the true whole life data cost. Now we understand the data condition of those systems affected. And then it leads to the last set of slides, and apologies if you feel I've rushed through this, but I'm totally open for conversation and discussion. I think that would be much more beneficial if people want, is what are the benefits we're seeing and the lessons we're learning. And I'm deliberate with that language because we're still seeing the benefits and they still continue to come. And it's a long-term thing. You know, I've committed to a 15-year plan with our executive because one, that is resolving some of the technical debt, the underinvestment that we've seen in years, but two, it's also delivering a very ambitious program of work that I mentioned earlier. And the lessons learning is because they're every day. There's not a day where I don't come to work and learn something about what we could have done differently, where we've made a mistake, what we should do more of, what we should do less of. And I thought I'd share with some of those things with you today. So the first one was that valuing our data, infonomics, the work of Doug Laney, and applying that at the enterprise level was a critical component. And it helped senior leaders view our information in a comparable way to how they view any business. It helped them understand £1 billion worth of investment in data versus £1 billion worth of investment in infrastructure. And we were able to, as I mentioned at schools, we were able to create that common denominator between the world of physical infrastructure and the world of virtual infrastructure. So people could start making the trade-offs between investments rather than here's our business and it's the world of physical and whatever we've got left we'll spend on data if it's a priority. We never use the valuation to make a business case work. It's very easy for me to parade a large number, 60 billion, and say, well, let's make it 65 billion. You know, 5 billion worth of growth. Who wouldn't want to give you hundreds of billions to do work? But our valuation was more important to us in affecting our culture than it was to make a business case work. If you have to use a valuation to make a business case work, then I'd question that is your business truly bought into what your business wants to do and what your data aspirations wanted to do. We also did the evaluation at the enterprise-wide, and that was a bit of a risk because so much data, such a big business, to do it in enterprise-wide, you'd be tempted to do it at a data set level. We'd be tempted to do it at the database level almost, but we didn't think that was the right way to do. And the reason being is by doing it at the enterprise level, we made data an executive level discussion. By showing that our data was worth half the value of our physical infrastructure, we were able to challenge things like, well, is our executive committee talking enough about data? Could you point to your data investments in the organization the same way that you could point to your major construction projects in the organization? And some of the changes we've seen is so much more time in the executive committee with data on the agenda, and not at the end of the agenda, at the front of the agenda. You know, the formation of executive level subcommittees that are ownership of data. And it's not just a room full of technical folk, data people and technology people, business representatives with the authority and the accountabilities of the executive committee to make information around decisions. And again, stress the fact that our data valuation was almost like a Rosetta Stone. It enabled different languages to connect, different ways to see the same thing, and describe the world of data in a way that people understood. It created that common denominator. It really helped the broader business start speaking data, and it helped our data professionals speak business. You know, you got one side of the room talking in data quality, not understanding the world of asset condition, one side of the world talking about asset condition and not understanding in the world of data quality. And we've managed to bridge that gap. And I was really pleasantly surprised. I was on a meeting last week where I had two directors from different parts of the business discussing the pausing of an investment into a replacement system because they didn't understand the condition of the data, so weren't confident they could deliver the return on investment promised. And the moment that happened, I thought, you know, if you want to affect culture, really focus on the language, help people understand and give people the tools to be able to speak data. Very important for me was it earned us the mandate to be the Chief Data Office. And it's something you've got to do every day, in my opinion. There's not a day where I think, have I earned the mandate to be a CDO? I didn't take for granted the fact that I was appointed to the CDO, that I'd have all the support, authorities and accountabilities needed to be a successful CDO. And it's really helped us earn the mandate to do that. We were able to invest, as I mentioned earlier, in the non-glamorous activities. I say that, you know, in the database, in the master data management, in the data processes. And I mean significant investments in these areas, not just little investments, really fundamental, large investments in growing. Some of the stuff around cashables, you know, this year alone, we've delivered 80 million of cashable benefits in just this part of the financial year, and our years run from April. And that's of very, very small investments, sub £1 million investments, have gone on to be able to create changes in process, changes in business activity that our operations functions and other parts of the functions have been happy to hand back 80 million of real cash, not just social economic investments. And probably the biggest benefit, you know, hopefully I can be in this role a lot longer, but if the case is time to move on, the one thing that I think I'm most proud of and that we're most proud of is the culture with regards to data. As I mentioned earlier, when we took on the role, our data professionals just felt beaten up. They didn't feel like they had a place at the table. They didn't feel respected. They didn't feel loved. They didn't feel someone had their back. They've gone from wondering if they'd be invited to a meeting to chairing the meeting. They've gone from the person you go to speak to your data privacy assessment to the person you could go to for advice on who's going to help me manage a £60 billion asset. And the cultural shift that's had is you know, I say in our business, it's turned our data lambs into data lions. You know, you see them walk into a room confidently, proudly, sitting there with the knowledge that they're there to lead our country to a digital future. And in the same way that the likes of Isambard Brunel left us a physical investment that's left behind of a Victorian infrastructure that we still use and rely on today, my guys want to be the people to leave behind the digital legacy for the future by recognizing that they were the people that really propped up and managed the first people in the UK to do an enterprise-wide valuation, which led to an understanding that our data was worth half the value of the physical infrastructure that we say they're there. So I'm going to stop sharing slides now, so I'm actually presenting on two screens. We had a bit of an issue earlier from my side with VPNs, etc. Hopefully you found that helpful. I'm just going to check that if there's some questions and stuff popping through. Hopefully you found that helpful. Hopefully you've inspired you a little bit. So I'll just read the questions. Right, okay. What was the book? The book is Doug Blaney's Infonomics. Like I say, if I was being a bit cheeky now, I'd say that the most valuable piece of data our organization holds is the corporate version of that book. If you haven't read it, it's an absolute must. You'll probably find Doug. I know he presented yesterday, so I know he's around. Reach out to him, email him, speak to him. It is one of the most breathtaking books you'll read. It's not just a this is what you could do. It's a this is how it can be done type book. Companies that were born digital. How can you help to begin to value? I think do it. Look through the value you create as an organization. Think about, what's my organization here to do? What's the value we create as an organization? And then work to the assumption that some of that value must be as a result of information you produce. So, if you're in the value of transport and your role is to be able to push products and services around the country, how much of that, if you block a road, how much of that roadblock is known to your stakeholders by the information you release to Google on where that roadblock is? So really look at it from the view of your customers' and what your organization is in the business of, and see if you can use apportionment techniques and other techniques to triangulate what that value is. Did we get our CFO on board with the data valuation? How'd that conversation go? Yeah, yes, we did. I suppose there's two types of CFOs. There's CFOs that talk around value, and there's CFOs that talk around cost. And unfortunately, we've got a brave CFO that is in the business of value. We're still having discussions now about should our data be on the balance sheet, because the economists worry about how you depreciate it or appreciate or amortize it, depending on if it's tangible, intangible. But the concept still remains whether it's on the balance sheet or not. And that's what's important for me, that it's not that our data's value until it's used, in the same way that our road lives on the balance sheet, even if you don't drive on it. Our data is inherently valuable, and our role is to understand what that value is and protect it. Before this role, who would want to check you to have this kind of wisdom? I don't know if I'm wise. I think I'm just brave and with a strange risk tolerance. I think the thing, when I took this role, I was in transport and I was in data as well. And I got to a point in my career, if I'm speaking really honestly, where I thought, how I got to where I am just from being in the same company for long enough. And I wanted to join a company where I didn't know the business, I didn't know the people, and understand if I could pull off what I did. And what was really exciting for me was seeing others grow. I think my job as a leader is to create more leaders. And that might be cliched, it might sound cheesy, but that's what we're there to do. And I think one thing I've learned is follow your passion. When you lead, it's around taking a personal risk, going into the unknown. When I think of wars and conflict, and I've never been a soldier, I can imagine, was the general absolutely sure of what they were going to do? Probably not. But did they sit at the front and go over the line with their guys? So my job is around creating certainty where there is none. My job is around creating clarity where there's ambiguity. And my job is to help others feel more confident about making a decision and marching off into the unknown when you don't quite know where you're going and don't quite know if you're going to do it. And I think that's certainly where I've changed, is to follow my instincts more, listen to my gut feel, and really trust your people. Discharge as much accountability. You'd be surprised how many data projects are stifled because senior leaders get in the way instead of really trusting your organization to run with it, set them the direction, set them the boundaries you want to operate in, and trust your people. Very nice presentation. Thank you very much. That's very kind. What's your take on the master data management challenge? I find people rush into the technology far too soon. Calibra, Informatica's the array of tools, fantastic tools, fantastic companies to work with. But until you've got an organization that's prepared to back the operating costs, the upfront capital investment, they're not right for you and they're not ready for you. And by all means, work with those companies to learn what you need to do to be a better client to really do master data management. The big thing for us in master data management was actually understanding what data our business needed to be successful. Like I said earlier, so many people will tell you, my data's terrible, my data's this, oh goodness me, my data's that. And when you really challenge them, what data do you actually need? And what does quality look like? When you talk around needing a geospatial model, is that plus or minus 50 meters accuracy? Is that plus or minus 3 millimeter accuracy? Is it by country or state or whatever? So before jumping into master data management, we've invested heavily for about 2 years in actually understanding what data our organization needed to be successful, and growing a team of information professionals to turn that into a BAU service that still continues today. How long ago did you start positioning data? I've been in data, believe it or not, for 20 years. So I turned 40 today. Today's my 40th birthday. So I've been in data for 20 years. I actually started life as a musician, and I got my first job on the railway when I was 20 years old, around that time. Music and data, they're very familiar with me. You deal with the same problems and the same things, and I'm dyslexic to bits, so I've just found data a really nice way to communicate. I get it. I see numbers, I see patterns, I see how things connect, I see how to tell stories, and that was my role. Before this role, who checked you? Okay, that's a stupid question. Right, I can see no other questions, so I'm not sure. Well, listen, again, thanks so much for your time. Thanks for the opportunity to present today. I hope you've got something on it. I think you can all ping me in the chat messages if you've got other specific questions. It's been really fun, and thanks for the lovely questions, and thanks for the compliments on the presentation. That's been very kind of you.
Hi. Thank you, Davin, for that thought-provoking presentation. We really enjoyed it, and I also would like to thank all those who in the audience who have watched this session. Just programming note: we are going into lunch break, and then we will resume our session at 2 o'clock. So I'll see you right here. Probably this track B is the best track, right? So anyway, I'll see you after the lunch. Stay tuned.